Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you very much for joining once again for the Monks podcast.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I'm happy to be here again.
It's
amongst
wonderful.
the monks. To be amongst the monks.
Amongst the monks. Actually, you're giving me the opportunity to be amongst a monk, a senior monk. I think this is the longest series we have been having on the Monks podcast. I have discussed various issues with different devotees, but it's been a consistent theme for meditation. So it's wonderful. And we are going toward, I think, Krishna next time. This is today's Lord Ram.
Today, I think, is Ram, no?
Yes, Maharaj.
Rama.
Yeah. So, on Lord Ram, actually, I grew up hearing stories of Ram. We had pictures of Ram in our homes. Right behind our childhood, right behind my home, there was a temple of Ram. So, in one sense, from a cultural connection with Lord Ram is more than with Lord Krishna. This is my upbringing. And I've written some.
Your upbringing was which part of India?
Mostly Maharashtra. My parents were from Andhra, grandparents, but I was born and brought up in Maharashtra. So
which part?
I was born in the heartland of Maharashtra, in a remote place called Chandrapur. I grew up over there. It is still considered to be like a rural or a tribal area almost. Then I came to Nasik. So my youth was in Nasik. Then I came to study in Mumbai, in Pune, for my engineering. And that's where I was introduced to Krishna consciousness. So in Chandrapur, I had a lot of exposure to Lord Ram because just behind our home, there was a Ram temple. So
you have Lord Ram in your blood.
Oh, God. Blood. Okay, yeah, at least in my psyche, somewhere is there. Krishna, hopefully, by Krishna's mercy.
Yeah, you've been so much blessed. I didn't hear, I don't think I heard about Lord Rama until I joined the devotees, which means I was 21 years old.
Oh.
So I'm a late starter.
You can leaps and bounds, and you're helping many others to start early now by your outreach. But were you from a more of religious or spiritual inclination, your background earlier, Maharaj?
Yeah, there was a strong religious orientation in Protestant Christian tradition. And it's a bit complicated. But I was understanding that there's some higher reality from very early, I would say. And I had some kind of attraction, some vague attraction to religious life and then spiritual life. And then in my early college days, I became attracted to yoga teachings. And then I heard about bhakti yoga. And when I met devotees in Germany, they said, we practice bhakti yoga. And I immediately thought, I think I've found what I'm looking for.
Oh, amazing. So, if I'm not mistaken, you're from America, but you met devotees in Germany.
I actually met devotees in America first, but I didn't interact with them. I saw them and heard them at my university. They would have kirtan every day on the streets in the open area, just next to the main entrance to the university park area. So they were definitely impressing me gradually at that time.
Oh, okay.
but it was in Germany that I first interacted with devotees.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Shivananda Prabhu and Prithu Prabhu. They were pioneers in German Yatra back then.
Yeah, I've seen that book
1972.
about Prabhupada in Germany. Prabhupada's disciple. I think, what is that book called? About the disciples in Germany. It's quite a
Yeah, Srila Prabhupada's disciples in Germany.
Germany. Yeah, right. Yes, Maharaj. So I thought of talking about Lord Ram from one perspective, but if you have something in mind, we can go along.
Well, I thought we should hear first Sri Jayadev Goswami's
Oh yes, beautiful
prayer.
Yeah, yes, definitely.
And then I thought we could go to also one of the prayers in the 9th canto, which is interesting because it gives benediction and it describes practically the whole pastime of the Lord's appearance all in one verse. So let's start with the Dashavatara Stotra. Vitarasi Dikshurane Dikpati Kamaniyam Dashamukamauli Balim Ramaniyam Keshavadrita Raghupati Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare. And I have a translation here. You scattered in all directions, all 10 directions, the severed heads of Ravana as a beautiful offering to the deities of the various quarters, east, west, and so on. O Keshava, you took the form of Rama. So it's interesting. Dashamukha Mauli Balim Ramaniyam. His 10 heads were offered. I think the literal meaning would be as balidana, as an offering to the directional divinities.
This is beautiful. So Maharaj, just a quick, I had this question and I have a particular understanding I want to confirm from you. So generally when the Lord is glorified, so the glorification, especially in poetic form, need not necessarily be a literal truth, isn't it? Because as far as I have read in the Ramayana, it's not that his 10 heads were cut and sent in 10 directions. It's more like that his heart was shot. That's the Valmiki Ramayana version. And Tulsi Ramayana is that there was his life force was in his belly was shot. And he had the power to regenerate his head. So even if his heads were cut, they would reappear again. And I don't think that after he was killed, after that, they would do anything to his corpse. And Ram was not a kind of person who would deform or deface the corpse of a dead enemy. So,
yeah. Well, this is kind of a bigger topic, especially in relation to Ram Leela. We can maybe talk more about it later, but there are so many versions of Ram Leela. And we can say, of course, we can say, well, the only really bona fide is Valmiki Ramayana. Yeah, we can discuss that. But I like to think that the Lord's pastimes are unlimited, and so there can be variations.
Oh, beautiful.
And the variations, of course, one can invoke kalpa beda nyaya. We can say in different kalpas, the variations appear. That would be one way.
Oh, okay.
One way to say it. But let's let's now go to a verse in the Bhagavatam.
Which verse is Maharaj? 9?
Canto 9, chapter 10, verse 4.
Okay.
And I like to read the Sanskrit, if I may, because it's one of the longer meters. I don't remember. Shagdara, maybe. Yeah. So, Gurvarte Chattaraja Vyacharanuvanam Padmapadbyam Priyaya Pani Sparshaksham Abhyam Mrijita Patarujo Yo Harindranujavyam Vairupyachur Panakya Priyaviraha Rushoropita Bruvrijimba Trastabdir Badha Setu Kaladavadahana Koshalendro Vatana. That takes more practice to chant properly. To keep the promise of his father intact, Lord Ramachandra immediately gave up the position of king and, accompanied by his wife, Mother Sita, wandered from one forest to another on his lotus feet, which were so delicate that they were unable to bear even the touch of Sita's palms. The Lord was also accompanied by Hanuman, king of the monkeys, or by another monkey, Sugriva, and by his own younger brother, Lord Lakshmana, both of whom gave him relief from the fatigue of wandering in the forest. Having cut off the nose and ears of Shurpanakha, thus disfiguring her, the Lord was separated from Mother Sita. He therefore became angry, moving his eyebrows and thus frightening the ocean, who then allowed the Lord to construct a bridge to cross the ocean. Subsequently, the Lord entered the kingdom of Ravana to kill him like a fire devouring a forest. May that Supreme Lord Ramachandra give us all protection. So it's a prayer of benediction, which is also quite an extensive description of the pastime, with a few details which could also be discussed. And it's interesting just to consider the Bhagavatam version of Rama Leela. The fact that it's relative to, let's say, Valmiki Ramayana, it's extremely short. It's 2 chapters. And Shukadev Goswami in the beginning says to Maharaj Parikshit, I'm just going to give you a short summary because you already are familiar with the stories. So it's assumed, one can say, not only that Maharaj Parikshit is familiar, but also any reader of the Bhagavatam is familiar. Similar to in the first canto, much of the first canto is a kind of sequel to the Mahabharata, with some overlap also of later portions of the Mahabharata, and of course, very much summarizing. But the assumption is that one is already familiar with the Mahabharata, and that's what gives significance to the Bhagavatam sequel and summary, because one's already familiar with it, and now one gets, the particular perspective, which can also be considered a kind of commentary to the Mahabharata. And now in the 9th canto, we can also take these 2 chapters as a kind of commentary on the Ramayana of Valmiki.
That's an interesting point. But normally, I never thought of it as a commentary, because isn't technically a commentary said to be like a bigger than the original book, or is it?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
No, Sridhar Swami's commentary on the Gita is often quite brief for certain verses. For other verses, he elaborates more, but sometimes it's short.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I also thought about this. It's remarkably brief, and there are in some ways, Shukdev Goswami is also presenting things from the perspective that is most relevant for, say, Parikshit Maharaj. Most of the Bhagavatam, they are pastimes which are focused on the idea of, say, renunciation of the world and attachment to the Lord. And one of the things which first struck me as quite odd, but then as I read try to understand the mood of the Bhagavatam, I appreciate it a little bit more. I would like to get your understanding also. The Bhagavatam says that in order to demonstrate how somebody who is attached to their spouse, their wife, suffers, the whole pastime of Ram being exiled happened.
Yes, and Prabhupada mentioned that once. In my memory, it was in a talk, maybe it was a conversation in Hyderabad. And he was, as I remember, he was kind of chuckling about it. He said, what is the essential lesson of the Ramayana? The essential lesson is how much trouble it is to have a wife.
So my understanding of that perspective is that also that it's from the Parikshit Maharaj has to be detached from, he has renounced everything and to focus on the Lord. And in that sense, that it is encouraging him to do that. But in India, especially, that idea of that means just to teach something, Ram let Sita get accused and he didn't come to her defense and he exiled her when she was pregnant. So it seems quite a questionable thing to do. So just to teach the lesson of detachment, like Sita is made to suffer for no fault of hers. It does seem a little objectionable. So my understanding was that is from the Bhagavatam's perspective of helping a person to become detached, a person who is in the position of Parikshit Maharaj. But
Shukadeva Goswami had a very specific task, which was to, as you point out, it was to help Maharaj Parikshit prepare for the inevitable, which was going to happen very soon. And so, as you say, renunciation was, it's you can say, a very dominant theme of the whole Bhagavatam, and therefore, in that theme, with that flavor, you can say, he's speaking these 2 chapters. But now I have a question. Why is it that he emphasizes in this verse we just read how delicate Ram's feet are? They're so delicate. He's wandering in the forest, so delicate that they were unable to bear even the touch of Sita's palms.
It's almost an echo of what that comes in the 10th canto, or we could not echo, we could say precursor. of what they will describe about Krishna and the gopis.
And yeah, anticipation. Yeah.
Anticipation.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a good answer, because there are a lot of passages in the first 9 cantos that are anticipating, hinting at, or somehow anticipating points or elements in the 10th canto. Yeah.
Another thought I had
It's
was
also, and because of that, you can say it's hinting at the Madhurya relationship between Rama and Sita, isn't it?
yes, definitely. It's also maybe one way is that it's also to illustrate his renunciation. That if he was so used to comfort and then he accepted so much austerity. And what was the first word over there? That he did it because of just to honor the word of his father. So
yeah,
that's another way of looking at it. And it's interesting.
But it's also interesting in this verse. It's also interesting that, correct me if I'm wrong, but it says here that it was Lord Rama who disfigures Shurpanakha. I was thinking it was Lakshmana who does that.
Yes, it is. I mean, maybe you can say that. I think we discussed this thing of performative utterance. That it is Ram's instruction which did that. So in that sense, Ram told Lakshman to do that.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So
and then there's this emphasis on the interaction that Rama has, again, still this verse, between Rama and the ocean. He becomes angry, says he therefore became angry because he was separated from Mother Sita.
Yeah. So,
and then he therefore became angry, moving his eyebrows and thus frightening the ocean. So all it took for him to frighten the ocean was to move his eyebrows.
Yeah.
Who then submits to him. And there are 2 prayers I won't be able to find so quickly now, but there are 2 prayers of the ocean to Lord Rama. Oh, here they are, verses 14 and 15.
Oh, okay.
Are prayers by the ocean to the Lord.
It's interesting that the Ramayana describes that first Lord Ram tried the peaceful way, and he actually performed austerities to appease the god of the ocean, Samudradev. And Samudradev didn't listen, and then Lord Ram got enraged. And it's described that all the aquatics, that this huge wave started billowing in the ocean, the aquatics started getting burnt.
The ocean starts boiling.
Yeah. They fasted for 3 days. You want to go to Sanskrit, Maharaj, or should we read the English?
Where are we? Verse 14?
13. Yeah, 13 is a description that he became fearful.
Oh, right. Okay, 14, let's just do the English.
Yeah.
O all-pervading Supreme Person, we are dull-minded and did not understand who you are. But now we understand that you are the Supreme Person, the Master of the entire universe, the unchanging and original personality of Godhead. The demigods are infatuated with the mode of goodness, the Prajapatis with the mode of passion, and the Lord of ghosts with the mode of ignorance, but you are the master of all these qualities. And then the next verse, he makes the point, the practical point. My Lord, you may use my water as you like. Indeed, you may cross it and go to the abode of Ravana, who is the great source of disturbance and crying for the three worlds. He is the son of Vishrava, but is condemned like urine. Please go kill him, and thus regain your wife, Sita Devi. O great hero, although my water presents no impediment to your going to Lanka, please construct a bridge over it to spread your transcendental fame. Upon seeing this wonderfully uncommon deed of your lordship, all the great heroes and kings in the future will glorify you. So the verse is, it's saying, yes, please do it. And then it's going on to, in effect, describe what's going to happen in the future. He is going to build this bridge and this setu, and then he's going to kill Ravana. So it's an anticipation, but again, Maharaj Parikshit already knows the story.
Yeah.
And we also already know the story. And as you said, you know it since childhood. But hearing it again and again and again is always enlivening. Why is that? Why is it that Krishna Leela works in that way? I read an article by a scholar who attended the Ram Leela performance in Ramnagar, just across the Ganga from Varanasi. And she attended the entire 1 month performance, and she describes it in quite some detail, what the whole atmosphere, how everything goes on. And she's describing the mood of the audience. And she mentions that many of the audience, well, everyone in the audience already knows the whole story. They are performing not Valmiki Ramayana, but Ramcharitmanas of Tulsidas.
Yeah.
And she says many of the audience have practically the whole Tulsi Ramayana memorized. They already know it. So someone in the West could say, well, I don't want to see, okay, sometimes I'll see a film more than once. I already know what's going to happen. I want to see it again. But again and again and again and again, no, there's no need for that. But somehow with Krishna Leela and Rama Leela, we want to see it again and again and again.
Yeah.
Also the late 1980s television performance or television broadcast that went for more than a year in India, directed by, I'm forgetting his name, was it Ram Sagar?
Ramanand Sagar.
Ramanand Sagar, yeah. The reports are that every Sunday morning when that was broadcast, India would come to a stop. Practically it was like lockdown. Everyone just stopped and watched the Ramayana.
Yes, I remember that, Haraj. We were in a remote place at that time. And we didn't have TV, but we would go to our neighbor's place or go somewhere else. Like many of
Yeah.
our neighbors bought television just because to watch that serial.
And some villages, again, I read about this. Some villages, maybe there would be only one television in the whole village. They would get an extension cord and they would bring it out to the village square or whatever, and everyone would gather around. And they might also put a garland or garlands around the TV screen.
Yeah, they actually do not only garland, they would actually have Aarti plate ready, and first time Lord Ram would
Aarti.
appear, they do Aarti.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember that. In fact, recently, Maharaj, during the pandemic, the Indian, because there was a complete lockdown, the Indian government decided to retelecast the Ramayana because people had to stay at home. And it seems that this cracked all records. I'm just looking at the stats. It seems that they had something like 4.9 billion viewing hours, 6.9 billion viewing minutes for just the first four episodes.
Acha.
And 93.3 billion viewers. So it is far more than any of the popular television shows in America or anywhere else in the world. And the amazing thing is, all this is not only already broadcast, but it's already available on YouTube freely for anybody to watch. But still, it was there, and the appeal is enduring even now. Yes, Maharaj. So what is that author's? Who is that author, Maharaj? Is it from that Vasudha Narayanan's book, Life of Hinduism? I remember reading something about it there also, about the Ram Leela.
About Ram Leela in Ramnagar?
Yeah, that article.
Oh, that article, where was it? I would have to look. It's been a while.
So what was her conclusion, by the way? Means, what was the reasoning? Why are people so attracted? Did she give a spiritual explanation or some sociological, psychological explanation?
It's been so long since I read it. But she was deeply appreciating. She's not, she's not a religion basher.
Oh, okay.
She's appreciating that how much dedicated people are. And she points out, some days it was raining, but this doesn't stop anyone. Everyone is coming, sitting in the mud, doesn't matter. And also she was highlighting how the audience become actually participants. They feel themselves to be, in effect, like residents of Ayodhya, so that when Ram, in the drama, when Rama leaves for the forest, they actually move. They physically go on a procession and they go to a different part of Ramnagar, and the entire audience is going in this mood that we are residents of Ayodhya. And so in that mood, that it's participation. And I would say that's perhaps her main conclusion. I'm experiencing what is called Abhava. Abhava is one of the 10 pramanas of classical Nyaya. It's the experience of the absence of something or someone. Just like Lord Ramachandra was experiencing the absence of Sita. So now we are experiencing the absence of Chaitanya Charan Prabhu we see his chair, and we see that he is not there.
Sorry, Maharaj. Net had got disconnected, so I just called up the person.
Ah, okay. That's all right. We discussed in your absence. We discussed.
I was just nearby. I heard everything you said.
We were discussing Nyaya.
Yes, Maharaj. You mentioned about Anubhava and how that is the highest command.
Abhava. Abhava.
Abhava. Okay. I thought
Abhava is one of the 10 forms of one type of pramana, and it's the sense of absence.
Oh, okay. Abhava.
It's the awareness that something is not present.
That's fascinating. So,
Yeah.
I thought of Anubhava, which is like one of.
So you were not present.
Okay.
But I was relating this to Ram Leela because Lord Ram was feeling that Sita was not present.
Yes.
And therefore we have a drama. I want to share one more verse from the Bhagavatam, a famous one. This is quoted in Lagu Bhagavatamrita, but it's in the Bhagavatam. It's Canto 11, and it's spoken by Karabhajana Muni. I don't remember. I think it's either chapter 2 or chapter 5.
That one, Tyaktva the verse, the Tyaktva Dustyaja.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tyaktva sudustyaja surepsita raja lakshmin armishta arya vachasa yadagadharanyam maya mrigam dayitayapsita manvadavat vande mahapurushate charanaravin. And here it is, 11:5:34. O Mahapurusha, I worship your lotus feet. As the most faithful follower of religious principles, you honored the words of your respected father and went to the forest, abandoning royal splendor so opulent that the demigods desired it. In the forest, you chased after the illusory deer desired by your beloved consort. And commentators explain, this is elaborated in the purport, that this same verse can be applied to, or can be taken as describing also Lord Krishna's pastimes and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes.
Yes.
So it has a triple meaning depending how you take the words. But we may say the initial understanding is that it's referring to Lord Rama. And in this short commentary of Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu in the Lagu Bhagavatamrita, it says, this verse can alternatively be taken as Karavajana's description of the Lord rather than an homage directed to him, in which case the word dharmishta, or virtuous one, is directed to Nimi Maharaj.
Oh, okay.
So it's just, he's pointing out it can be taken either as a description or as praising, as addressing the Lord.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, that's a nice verse for one reason, because the next verse
is about Lord Chaitanya.
is about Lord Chaitanya, yeah, specifically.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm finished with the verses I wanted to quote. Now you wanted to discuss.
Thank you, Maharaj. So beautiful thing, a scriptural, especially a lot of scriptural verses, but this is a very good meditation on how Lord Ram has been appreciated in different portions of scripture by different teachers in our tradition or by acharyas in our tradition. So one of the things which I have been working on with respect to the Ramayana is when I grew up, we learned more human values than devotional values from the Ramayana. Human values means that how the younger brother should obey the older brother, the children should obey their parents, the wives should follow their husbands, how we should honor our word. So of course we're all Ram-centric and we understood that Ram was God. But that rigid differentiation between, say, what we might call as mundane lessons and spiritual lessons was not there. It is all a part of organic teaching. So in terms of what was uplifting us. And there is one of the most prominent Christian missionaries who came to India. And in fact, in the Gita Press, in their English translation of Tulsi Ramayana, Tulsi Ramcharitmanas, they quote this missionary and they say that if any Westerner wants to understand the Indian mind, this is one book they absolutely need to read. Because no other book has had a greater influence on the Indian mind than Ramayana. So,
okay.
So the point I was thinking of is that the Ramayana itself starts with this question: what are the characteristics of an ideal person? So, and is there an ideal person like that? In fact, that's the discussion which Valmiki has with Narad Muni, and then Narad Muni describes Ram to him, and then he gives him the inspiration, and through a happenstance, or we say divine arrangement, he gets the meter in which Ramayana is eventually composed. So, this question I have been pondering on that when I wrote a book on the Ramayana, or Wisdom from Ramayana on Life and Relationships. So
yes, you are quite a writer.
No, I'm doing some small writing. So it was it was reviewed in a few places in Times of India, in Financial Express, and others. So they were they were appreciative as well as critical. One thing was one of the authors who reviewed it said that I don't think the Ramayana has been explained ever in this way in terms of how it can help us to improve our relationships. I brought some analysis and insights about how misunderstandings occur, say, between Sugriv and Vali. And so in that sense, they were appreciative. But what they were critical of was that all the relationship problem solutions in this book culminate in bhakti. So if you are not interested in that, you may not find this book very appealing.
If you don't like bhakti, you won't like this. Well, what can you say, huh?
Yeah. So I told Giriraj Maharaj, that criticism is the perfection, he said.
Yeah, that's actually, you can take it as a compliment.
So I would like to discuss this topic of, in what way is Ram a perfect human being? And then maybe you can share some thoughts. So now in some ways, what is the ideal person? There may be some cultural specific ideas of an ideal, but still there are, even in the age of moral relativism, also still there are certain values that are always appreciated. And I'll say if one value could be selflessness or sacrifice, putting the other person before oneself and doing something for others. So my understanding is that while Lord Ram exhibits many virtues, that one virtue that permeates the whole epic is this virtue of selflessness, of a mood of sacrifice. So it is to honor his father's word that he goes to the forest, and it is to honor his word to his wife that Dasharatha allows his son to go to the forest, although that was worse than death for him. Then Lakshman also has no obligation to go. Sita also, in one sense, Sita is in a sense obliged. She's wife, but even then, Ram actually tells her, don't come with me to the forest. You stay under the protection of Bharat. And she has to insist, even up to the point of challenging Ram's masculinity. Sorry?
It's a very interesting exchange that happens there.
Yeah, it's amazing.
What kind of a man are you?
So then Ram revealed her heart. I would love to have you come with me, but I didn't want to impose this on you. So then she sacrifices, and Lakshman has no reason to go. So then now when Lakshman goes, his wife doesn't go with him. She says, I'll also come with you. He says, no, if you come with me, I'll have to take care of you. But I'm going there only to serve Sita and Ram. And then the later tradition says that he says, no, you won't have to serve me. I'll assist you in serving them. So he doesn't. He realizes that Lord doesn't like this. That he says that you can assist me in another important way. He says, right now, I have two duties. One duty to my older brother and the other duty to my parents. And when both of them are in the same place, I could do both duties simultaneously. But now when they're separated, I can't do both duties. So you stay here, and on my behalf, you serve my parents. And that is the best way you can assist me. So it's all a very moving and inspiring narrative. And then, of course, completely voluntary is Bharat's sacrifice. He has the kingdom dropped in his lap, we could say, without doing anything on his own. And yet he doesn't accept that. He accepts the responsibility without the facility, without any comforts. It's said that he lives in a forest and he performs actually more austerities than Ram also. Because he says that it's like he eats barley cooked in cow urine for the entire exile. As a Ram in the forest, he gets a variety of fruits and other things. So that mood of selflessness that is there. So the way I analyzed it, because one of the most troubling pastimes is what I said is of Sita being exiled. So the way I analyzed in my book was that Sita's being sent away is actually this culmination of the mood of sacrifice. Just as Ram was not at fault when Ram was sent to the forest. So I compared Ram's being sent to the forest by Dashrath with Sita's being sent to the forest by Ram. So
at the end.
At the end, yeah.
Okay.
At the end, because that causes a lot of heartburn. And that is
not
often
heartburn, not heartburn, heartache. Heartburn is something else.
No. They're two different things. I understand what you say. For devotees,
right.
For devotees there is heartache.
Yeah.
What is?
Anyway, it's a detail.
Okay. No, what I meant is that a lot of people feel angry and resentful because of how could Ram deal with his own wife like that, and how could a person who deals with somebody like that, even be considered God? So in that sense, I was talking from that perspective. From the devotional perspective is heartache. Okay. So it causes a lot of raises a lot of questions. Let's put it at that. So the way I tried to explain it was that it is the same mood of sacrifice attaining its culmination. The point is not that Sita was at fault, just as Ram was not at fault. Now, just as Dashrath didn't want Ram to go away, but he was obliged. Similarly, Ram didn't want Sita to go away, but he was circumstantially obliged.
Yeah.
So, and that
it is a nice parallel.
Yeah. Otherwise, why would a book which is purporting to say it is going to describe ideal human being describe that very human being abandoning his wife when she is pregnant. That is something which a normal human being will also not do. How would that person be considered ideal? So it's when we bring in this mood of sacrifice, that is the time when his wife needed him the most. And his natural, you could say, his natural inclination or natural chivalry to protect her, he sacrificed even that for the sake of his kingdom. Not even just for the sake of his kingdom, but rather, not that he was possessive about the kingdom, but for the sake of maintaining citizens on the path of dharma. So by having that, so that is one frame of looking at the Ramayana, of how various characters in the Ramayana, they strive for ideal behavior, and all of them, some of them go a long way, some of them fall before a long way, and some of them go in the opposite directions. So, any thoughts on this, Maharaj?
Yes, that's nice. I would just also say that taking this question, this issue of the ideal person, it seems to me that one of the messages of the Ramayana is that no matter how ideal you are, even Rama is put into situations where he cannot possibly fulfill his dharma in all spheres. So taking the point of banishing his wife at the end, he actually has two dharmas. One is to his wife, his family, and the other is to the public as the king, as the kshatriya. And the situation is either or. It's one or the other, and he chooses the dharma of king over the dharma of husband.
Yes. He chooses the larger good.
And a similar situation is when he is banished by his father. He is banished. In that case, he's accepting the dharma of obedience to the father over the dharma of being king. So you made a nice parallel, and I guess what I'm saying here is two things. There's also an inversion, and the inversion is there. It highlights that there's conflicting dharmas,
Yes,
which raises the question, and this is, I think it's even more so in the Mahabharata. It's been said the whole Mahabharata is trying to answer the question, what is dharma?
yes.
And the only sort of definite answer that's given is by Lord Krishna, Sarva Dharman Parityaja.
Oh, I didn't know that part. Okay. That is the only definite answer. I know at the end, the narration of Mahabharata also depicts, still they are perplexed. What is dharma? So it is a search for dharma. And the Mahabharata also has that same verse in the Bhagavatam, has that Mahajano in the Kathasapanta, that we learn that dharma from the Mahajanas.
Yeah.
So.
But there's something else going on here. And that is that on the one side, we say dharma is difficult to ascertain. But on the other side, we see that at least on the level of social interaction, which is where, we are generally concerned about dharma, that it's actually impossible to do everything that is expected. It's not, no, and this is what the Ramayana is saying. Even if you're God yourself. Even if you're so perfect that you are God, you're not going to be able to follow all the dharmas. There's going to be some conflict.
That's
And then
beautiful.
you have to make a choice. Then you have to make a choice. And as you make a choice, someone is not going to be happy. The residents of Ayodhya were very, very sad when Rama left for the forest. And we are all sad when when Rama banishes Sita to the forest.
Yeah. So
Now
in
there's
a
an
sense, the ideal.
interesting, I don't know, there's an interesting episode kind of in the middle of the Ramayana, which may illuminate this, or it may just complicate things.
Okay.
But it's the famous story of Lord Rama killing Vali.
Yes.
And as you know, that's described in the Valmiki Ramayana. As Vali is dying, he's accusing Rama of having completely departed from Dharma.
Hmm.
And then Rama refutes, he defends himself. Now, a lot of later commentators and modern express that they feel that his arguments were not convincing. That Rama's arguments are, they say, oh, they are disorganized, they are not very convincing. One of the arguments is, you're just an animal and I am hunting. And a hunter doesn't have to, walk in front of his prey to say, now I'm going to fight and kill you. That's an interesting argument, considering that Vali is speaking to him. So what kind of animal is this? But there's an interesting point that's made by one of the main commentators named Govindaraj. I think he may be a Sri Vaishnava, I'm not sure.
Yes, commentator.
So Govindaraj gives the explanation that if Rama had presented himself before Bali, there was a danger that Bali would surrender. And you may say, well, what's wrong with that? That's great if he surrenders. But Govindaraj makes the point that if he would surrender, that would spoil the rest of the story. There would be no longer reason for Rama to go to Lanka to save Sita and kill Ravana, because it would have all been accomplished in a different way. I'm not quite sure I get all the connections, but that's the argument apparently he makes.
Yeah.
So then you get this very interesting inversion again, where the reason for acting as he does, as Ram does, is so that Bali will not surrender to him. But of course, as he's dying, then he does surrender to him.
Yeah, that's true.
And there's a nice passage let's see if I can find that. Go ahead. While you're speaking, I will
Yes, Maharaj.
try to find this.
Yeah, that is, so there are a few incidents in the Ramayana which are quite troubling with respect to their ethical implications. And this is probably the second or the third among them, Vali's killing. Now, among the various arguments, what I find is not all of them are equally strong, but not that all of them are weak. One of the strongest arguments he uses is that basically you are an aggressor. You have taken your younger brother's wife and you have driven your brother away, and you never gave him a chance. So cohabiting with your younger brother's wife is like cohabiting with one's daughter. And for that sin, Ram says that I am still acting on behalf of, I am the protector of the king, protector of the world. I am a servant of Bharat, and I have to maintain law and order in society. So
Right.
that is a reasonable, and if we consider from the perspective of Atataina, that those aggressors can be killed without any sin being incurred. So that is so the way. And now regarding Govindra's explanation, I also had heard that. I'd forgotten that recently, but it's striking. So what he seems to also say is that Ram has already promised Sugriva that you will become the king. So then if Vali surrenders, then how will his promise to Sugriva be fulfilled? And
right.
He will become the king of Kishkinda. And another thing is that, so those, when I wrote on this topic, what I wrote is that we may not find the argument so convincing, but no, the significant fact is that Vali found it convincing. And Vali, actually, it was not just like a reluctant surrender of a defeated person. Vali actually, very movingly, he reconciles with everyone. He tells his son to hold no grudge, Angad to hold no grudges against Sugriva. He says, Sugriva didn't cause my death. It is my own actions which caused my death. He tells Sugriva and his wife Tara to stay under the shelter of, Angada and Tara to stay under the shelter of Sugriva. And then they describe the Ramayana that the reason why Ram's arrow, Ram is known as Amogha Sharam. His arrows never miss their mark. So the reason why that the arrow didn't kill him immediately was because he was the son of Indra, and Indra had given him a necklace. That necklace would ensure that the person wearing it would live, no matter how wounded they were. So now he could have very easily given that necklace to his own son, naturally, but he gave it to Sugriva. So that means he wanted to make amends over there. So in a sense, if there is a case, there's a case between, say, if there's some argument between the husband and the wife, and then they patch up, but some third party comes and says, hey, no, this is unfair. And they are actually making things worse among them because they have patched it up. So in this case, Ram and Vali accepts Ram's arguments, and Vali, it's not a reluctant, it's a wholehearted surrender and transformation. So in that sense, it's that is the most reasonable explanation I came to. You want to read
some nice point too. I just thought we can read Vali's response to Lord Rama. I found it. This is Kishkinda Kanda Sarga 18, starting verse 42. This is the critical edition translation by this fourth volume is translated by Professor Rosalind Lefebvre. So Vali says, please do not find fault with me even for the unseemly, displeasing words I spoke before by mistake, Raghava. For you understand worldly interests and know the truth, and you are devoted to the well-being of the people. Your immutable judgment about determining crime and punishment is correct. You know righteousness, therefore with righteous words, and righteousness is of course translating the word dharma. Therefore, with righteous words, comfort even me, known to be a flagrant violator of righteousness, dharma. Like an elephant mired in mud, Vali cried out in distress, his voice choked with tears. Then looking at Rama, he said softly, I do not grieve as much for myself or Tara or even my kinsman as I do for my eminently virtuous son Angada of the golden armbands. Then he goes on to express his concern for his son and his son's future and so on. So, yeah, there is this change in heart, we can say, on the part of Vali. As he lies dying, there is a change in heart. And this we might compare, it just occurs to me, I'm thinking aloud, to the death of Jatayu. I don't know, this may be a stretch, but Jatayu, of course, is fighting for Lord Rama when he's fighting Ravana, and Ravana overcomes him, and he's lying there dying, and Lord Rama comes. We can say it's not a change of heart, but it's his perfection now, because Rama is present before him as he's leaving his body. It's a very touching moment in which there's a perfection there, whether it's Rama's perfection, I would say it's Jatayu's perfection, just to have given his life for Rama and Sita. And there's a similar perfection, of course, for Vali, in that he is dying at the hands of Rama, we understand. But sort of putting aside the bhakti element and the understanding that if you're killed by the Lord, you're liberated, still he has had a transformation, he's had a change of heart, which kind of invites us to see the bhakti principle. So I find it difficult to understand the critics that you mentioned who are saying, well, if you don't like bhakti, then you may not appreciate this book, because the Ramayana, I mean, what is it if it's not about bhakti, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, okay, what happened? Let me clarify that. Actually, my publisher chose to position the book as a self-help book based on the Ramayana. So, so then they felt that self-help should not all culminate in bhakti. So that was their mood. But then, yeah, I agree with you. How can you talk about that? Ultimately, the Ramayana is about bhakti. So of course,
it's the only self-help there is.
That's beautifully put, yeah.
The only real self-help is to find the Supreme Self.
That is true, Maharaj. Beautifully put. So, although in one sense, Vali was killed by Ram, and Jatayu was killed on behalf of Ram. We are saying both attain the same destination. Ultimately, that was that the parallel you're making?
I'm speaking more not about destination so much as about the dramatic moment. They're both before Rama as they are dying.
Oh.
And that moment, it's a very powerful moment in both cases. Dramatically speaking, it's a very special. It's a perfection. Whatever the perfection may be, we understand it's, moksha, etc. It's back home, back to Godhead, and so on. But just from the point of view of the drama and the issue of perfection, being a perfect person in this world, we can see that those moments in both cases are themselves a kind of perfection, a kind of, certainly climactic moments. But you just pointed out there's a delay in the death of Bali, or Valin, he's sometimes. Yeah. And I wanted to share an interesting detail, because we were mentioning before that there's so many versions of the Ramayana in different parts of the world, which are making assorted adjustments to the story, we may say, which resonate with particular cultures. And so the Ramayana is very well known in Indonesia, all over Southeast Asia. It's also known, in China, within another story, another famous work. It's known in Japan. Recently, it's been made into an animated film in Japan. There's also an American animation which was done, what is her name? I'm not remembering now, but she did an animation called Sita Sings the Blues.
Oh, I remember Sita Sings the Blues, yeah.
You can find it on YouTube, I think. And anyway, that's a very different version. It's a kind of, you can say a feminist version, sort of taking Sita Devi's perspective. But here's something from a book called Ramayana in the Arts of Asia. It's a kind of big picture book. And it's describing different famous episodes from different traditions. So one section is the Battle of the Brothers. And first it gives a summary of the Valmiki Ramayana account. And then it gives a short account from Khmer, which I guess is Cambodia, the Rayamkher or Ramakirti, it's called. And here it's translated as Rama shoots his arrow at Vali, who catches it and sees his name on it. He sees his name on the arrow. He places that arrow on his head in respect. He's respecting the arrow because it's coming from Rama. But he accuses Rama of improper behavior for interfering in the fight of others, since he should protect living creatures. Rama offers to recall the arrow, but Bali refuses because he will not plead for his life. He releases his grip on the arrow, and the arrow pierces his body, flies to the sea for cleansing, and returns to Rama.
That's amazing.
And then it goes on. Tara falls in grief at the feet of Vali's body and laments, "This is divine retribution for some wrong you committed long ago." The ground is now your royal couch. Actually, this is in Valmiki Ramayana, close. With a forested hill for a pillow and the star-strewn sky as a canopy. The wind is your music, the moon your torch. And then Indra descends. You mentioned Indra. Descends from heaven and sprinkles perfumed water on Bali, granting him passage to paradise. Holy men in the forest recite from the sacred texts for his entrance into nirvana, the state of absolute bliss and freedom from pain. So I guess this is, some Buddhist influence or elements are there. He attains nirvana.
Yeah. So this is interesting. One of the most, when first time I read it, thank you for sharing all these. I knew that there were variants or other retellings with different degrees of harmony with the original in different parts of the world. But I didn't know there was like one book where all of them are available or many of them are available.
Well, it's not many, it's a handful.
Okay.
Yeah. We have one scholar, by the way, in Oxford, who is retired now, and he has been, most of his academic life, he's been studying the Ramayana, and now he's continuing to study the Ramayana, he and his wife both. In particular, they are cataloging the different versions of Ramayana from different parts of the world. So it's a years-long project that they're working on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This is John Brockington and his wife Mary. Very nice people. So anyway, different versions.
So,
and speaking of different versions, I want to little bit advertise because I found it just so nicely done. There is a 3-volume rewriting, you can say, a creative presentation of the Ramayana done by Vrinda Devi, Vrinda in America, and her mother, Annapurna, is the illustrator. Beautiful illustrations and amazingly nicely written, with an emphasis again on the perspective of Sita, but very tastefully done, and I would say very well, you can say venturing into the inner life of the personalities of Sita, of Rama, of Lakshman, how Lakshman feels as he is with Sita and Rama, some of the awkwardness of being with Sita and Rama, over many months and years, and a lot of very amazing insights, I would say.
Oh, okay. That's fascinating.
It's a trilogy called Sita's Fire.
Yeah, I've heard about it. I've not yet read it till now. Other devotees also told me about it. I found also Krishna Dharma Prabhu's Ramayana rendition very beautiful. In fact, as compared to this brings us a bigger question, Maharaj, that say that the Gita Press has tried to accurately translate into English, but it seems that to translate into a particular language, if somebody, for them to be really good in that language, it's not just like the linguistic expertise, but there's a natural flow. So it's one thing is like linguistic expertise, other thing is writing ability. So that joy of reading reading a well-written text. That doesn't come just because the text is well translated in terms of accuracy and fidelity. So
Yeah.
it's a dynamic thing.
Yes,
Now,
a good translation of any major text becomes itself a classic. In the Western world, the I think best example of this is what's called the King James Version of the Bible. This was a translation done in, I guess, the 16th or 17th century, and it became the core of English literature. It became hugely influential, the style and everything about it, and it continues, you can say, to have influence. Although now there are so many later translations, but none of them compare in sort of the use of language, the beauty of the translation, I think many would say. So yeah, that is there. As far as translation of Ramayana goes, I suppose time will tell. As far as English translation, we do now have this 7-volume translation of the critical edition.
yes.
With it has also extensive notes, which I think is interesting. It includes many points that are made by the main commentators in the notes. So it's not neglecting the sort of classical commentators.
Oh, okay. That's interesting, because I don't think the Mahabharata critical edition was like that. Of course, Mahabharata doesn't have that many commentators also. It's just too big to be commented on.
Yes.
Yeah. So going back to your point, Maharaj, just one or two concluding points I wanted to make. With respect to these various retellings, there is one of the most provocative retellings I read was what is called the Jain Ramayana. And it has more or less a similar storyline, but with some differences. But the key thing is, throughout, while going in the forest, Ram meets Jain sadhus.
Achha.
And at the end of it, when Sita enters into the earth, their rendition is Ram becomes enlightened and becomes a Jain.
Ah. Of course, he has to become a Jain.
So it's a good example of I think the term is cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
And so
is it known roughly when that Jain version appeared?
It's a good question. I never thought about historically. Okay, so but then Jain Ramayana never became accepted as a mainstream in India.
Yeah.
So there is this thought I had that, like you talked earlier about different retellings, there is the Kalpa Bheda that is there, and the Lord's Pastime is unlimited. At the same time, although it's unlimited, it's not unlimitedly stretchable. So there are some retellings which just go against the core storyline or the core mood of the epic. So I've been thinking about this topic, and I thought of a metaphor. I think it's based on something I had read elsewhere. That is like it's like a Ramayana is not just a book. It's a living text. It's like a performance. So the Valmiki Ramayana is like the original singer or musician, and all the other retellings are like people who are joining in the orchestra. And to the extent those who join in the orchestra harmonize and enhance the singing of the core singer, to the extent they are welcomed and embraced. But if anybody starts singing disharmoniously, then they are left out. So in that, those retellings which say enhance the flavor of bhakti to Ram, while of course adding their own flavors, while adding their own nuances, enhancements, but as long as they enhance the flavor, they become accepted, and otherwise they are rejected. So now, how do we know that something enhances the flavor? Broadly, I thought of two things. One is that it shouldn't, at the very least, it shouldn't contradict the direct storyline of the Valmiki Ramayana, and it shouldn't it shouldn't contradict the not just the philosophy. Philosophy is one aspect, but the rasa, the mood of the Ramayana. Now, of course, whether these are like absolute criteria and who's going to judge whether the mood is being contradicted, that opens a Pandora's box. But in general, Hinduism was never a very organized religion which could like legislate that this is authorized and this is rejected. So
Yeah.
But it's not that just because there are many retellings of the Ramayana doesn't mean that there is no code to it or there is no soul to it. There is a very vibrant soul which has affected and animated all the Ramayans, and if that soul were not there, then none of the other Ramayans would have any appeal. Because one danger in saying that, because I think that was one of the reasons why one of the authors who wrote an article, one of the scholars who wrote an article about how there are so many Ramayans, he received a lot of flack from some Hindu community leaders, because at least the way it was construed as a public,
became a hot issue a few years back. I remember in Delhi.
Yeah, now one of the main reasons why that happened, in my understanding, was that the implication that was brought out from his work, whether he intended or not, was that because there are so many writings of Ramayana, none of them are really authentic. So that was the problem, because otherwise there's so many retellings which have survived, and I don't think anyone has militantly opposed any retelling just because it differs from the Valmiki Ramayana.
Yes, but okay, that gets into it gets into the hot political sphere. But I would argue that even if that's the case, that that the sort of bottom line of his article was that there's no authorized Ramayana. That in itself is not an argument for removing his article from the syllabus. Even if everyone wants to disagree with what he says, let everyone read what he says, and then you can argue against what he says. That's education. Not that you control, you ban the article, people shouldn't read this, it's going to disturb them. No, make it have, if it's going to disturb, then you should have strong arguments against it, but everyone should be able to read it and get both sides.
That's an interesting perspective. If I may counter, if I may put the other
idea, but it's if we're talking about intellectual culture, which I think is what we're trying to do in the university level, then you present your arguments. You say, okay, here's a Purva Paksha. In effect, what this ban of that article was doing was saying, we're going to remove the Purva Paksha and we're only going to have our Siddhanta.
Yeah. I understand that.
That's how I see it.
In principle, I agree that banning anything in today's world just doesn't work. What is that? I read a thing, anything that is forbidden actually becomes more fascinating.
Yeah,
so
this makes it more attractive.
Yeah. But the point is that the concern in in the traditional Hindu circles is not that they don't have, there is only the Purva Paksha. In the mainstream academia, most of the, there are hardly any traditional scholars who have any standing. So it is mostly,
So
it's like more and
that's
more
the problem.
left, more and more extreme, or what from the traditional perspective, questionable or leftist interpretations are being given, and it just goes from one limit to another limit to another limit, and then ultimately there will be no limit. So that is where the concern was. There was one of the scholars who critiqued that. He had done a very good comparison of, at that time, before Wikipedia came, Encarta dictionary. Encarta encyclopedia was quite a good resource. So he did a comparison of how Islam was treated in Encarta encyclopedia and how Hinduism was treated. So he said that if there are some points which don't make sense, they would write for Islam that there is the principle of incomplex of something like inconceivability, or to the will of Allah, because of which things can't be understood. And exactly similar point in Hinduism. So Hindu philosophy is riddled with incoherence and contradictions that make it untenable for the modern logical mind to accept. So so throughout, that bias could be seen. So I think that that burning, and that particular protest was like a pressure cooker giving out a whistle. After a long time of opposition, something just burst out. I agree, it actually did more damage than good, because it only painted those who were opposing as right-wing extremists, and removed, it overshadowed whatever due concerns they had, and painted them into, and placed them into a corner.
And furthermore, I think it just proves another point. As you said, there's no representation of the tradition in the academy. And this is one of the unfortunate results of the fact that in India, except for a few private universities, there is no departments for the study of religion.
Yes.
And therefore there are no channels for people who are interested in religion to become qualified academically, so that they can, bring a balanced argument which can be taken seriously. The traditional scholars are kind of, they live within a certain kind of world of presuppositions, which modern scholarship doesn't know how to they don't relate to. So how are they going to interact? To simply ban something is not really solving the problem.
Yes, that's true. So this is, I think...
Therefore, we are starting with Govardhaniko village. You're right there. We have Bhaktivedanta Research Center, which now has affiliation with University of Mumbai. And we now have a few postgraduate students who are preparing. They're getting training by devotees in scholarship on the level of master's and doctoral research.
Yes. I had a podcast with Gaurang Prabhu also about ARC. I think that is one of the most intellectually promising projects we have. And in one sense, in India, we have reached out to a lot of intelligent young people through our college outreach. Hmm?
Yeah.
At the same time, if they become devotees, many of them become brahmacharis. Afterward, they don't know how to engage their intelligence adequately, because not all
Right.
of them may want to become recruiters, preachers in the sense of recruiters. So what
Right.
more can they do?
Yeah.
Yes, Maharaj. So it does seem that. So if I
And
understand,
that's Varnashram Dharma. That's Varnashram Dharma, facilitating the Brahmins to do what Brahmins can do well, which is research, teaching, education. So they should be facilitated to do that in the modern context.
okay.
That's what the idea is.
I believe you are also one of the guides over there, isn't it, Maharaj? For the BRC?
Well, I just taught one one module on research skills, and we just completed that. I still have to mark all of the assignments for the students.
Okay. Yeah, I think they send me the links to the videos. Some of the students, I know them quite well. So I look, it's quite a rigorous process, researching for academic publications. It's
Yeah.
Yes, Maharaj. So
Yeah, so we want to get the students up to speed, because unless they can, follow these kind of standards of the academy, they won't be able to publish. They won't be able to get positions where they can teach. All of these things, there are skills that are required, like for any specialty. So we're trying to train up students to have these skills.
yes, Maharaj. So now that's one last question. I won't take too much. So you mentioned about within the
To learn
academic.
Rama.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Coming back to Ram only, but about Ramayana. See, from a traditional perspective, when I mentioned that, say there was no centralized system for authorizing or rejecting, but how would you consider from a devotee perspective that whether the academy might go into too much of a critical or deconstructionist mode, but as devotees, we also understand that Krishna Leela is, from our perspective, say Krishna, we focus on Krishna more than Ram. Krishna Leela is unlimited, and when we go to Vrindavan and we hear from some of the local Rajvasis, or say Dinabandhu Prabhu tells some stories which he has heard from local Rajvasis, they add to the flavor of what we know about Krishna. So, do you know whether in our tradition, whether any criteria have been given for determining which stories of Krishna can be accepted and which can't be accepted? There is, Bhakti Rasamrita talks about that Shastra Praman and Loka Praman, and many of these stories would fall in Loka Praman. But then Loka Praman becomes which Praman of which Lokas? That raises a question also.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's always going to be blurry boundaries.
I like that, blurring boundaries, okay.
Porous boundaries, and I think that is also one of the strengths. Who is patrolling the boundaries, we may say. And I would say that is where the gurus and the sadhus function. So you you mentioned our dear Dinabandhu Prabhu sharing much of the Lokika Katha. So he makes a choice that here is a story which will enrich the devotees. Otherwise, he wouldn't tell it. We all respect him as a sadhu, as a very good follower of our Acharya, Srila Prabhupada. And I don't know if he does this all the time. I don't think he does all the time, but best would be if when he or someone else is narrating such a story that he's saying, that he's kind of announcing, this is a local tradition. This is what the villagers say. So that the next person who hears it doesn't then, he may share the same story, but he or she will also make clear this is local katha, local tradition, according to, the Bhagavatam, this and this and this. Local tradition says that. The local tradition, we share it perhaps because it enriches our appreciation of Krishna. It also enriches our appreciation of Brijbasis.
Yeah.
They also are to be respected. We understand they're not ordinary, and so they can be respected. But I think the boundary patrol is always going to be essentially Guru and Sadhu. Sadhu Shastra Guru Vakya, Hridaye Koriya Aikya.
Yes, that's true. So, with respect to like this small, I don't want to use the word disclaimer for it, that it's a local tradition, but it just maybe just a note can be there. So just one point that raised in mind, even what to speak of telling other stories, even when we tell stories of Krishna, there is a certain amount of creativity involved in it. If you are going to make a drama, we can't just literally take the whole dialogue from the scriptures. We have to add a little bit more, flesh out the characters a little bit more, add some more dialogues.
Yeah.
So when I wrote my book for Ramayana for the first time, I was very hesitant to put any words in the character's mouth. But then it became, the whole book, the whole story was in indirect speech.
Yeah.
So then it became very, very dead kind of story. The story aspect of the story was gone. It was like not a story, but a report of the story. So, So then I started using the direct speech over there. And of course, I don't put words in the character's mouth, obviously. But still, there is a certain amount of creative license required when we talk about telling the stories. Like you earlier mentioned in the Sita trilogy, when we talk about the emotions of the inner emotions of the characters, there is a certain amount of creativity used in it, and
that is explained by Srila Rupa Goswami, that for the purpose of drama, writing drama, it is permitted to make adjustment to Shastra as long as the rasa is right. If you get the right rasa, and I think this gets back to what you were saying about harmonizing. If there's essential harmony, then we may accept some variation. So that's what Rupa Goswami says explicitly in his, what is it called? He wrote a textbook on drama.
Nata Chandrika, I think.
Yes, Nataka Chandrika. Thank you.
Yeah. It's interesting.
And so, for example, Haridas, not Haridas, not Haridas. the famous dramatist Kalidas.
Yes, okay.
So in his Shakuntala, he takes from the Mahabharata the story of Maharaj Dushanta and Shakuntala, and he elaborates. He tells he puts a twist into the story. He adds the curse and so on. That Maharaj Dushanta or Dushyant loses his memory because of a curse. In the Mahabharata, there's a very different kind of, he's actually just playing like he forgets because he needs to first establish that indeed Shakuntala is his wife for the public. So his purpose there is, you could say, a dharmic purpose, because he explains. Otherwise, if I just accept you now, people may not accept you, and then it's going to be a big problem. So he keeps putting her off, acting like he's forgetting, acting like she's making it all up. And then comes, I just read this a few days ago, then comes a voice from the sky saying, Maharaj Dushyanta, this is your wife, come on.
Come on.
But the point is that Kalidas makes it a rather different story, but I would assume that Srila Rupa Goswami would say he keeps the rasa, so it's okay.
So even drama is not like a frozen genre. Even modern novelizations we could call as dramas, because modern novels are not exactly plays. So, but still the rules we could apply here also.
Yeah, I think it's a good general principle.
Makes sense.
And as for embellishing, as you said, to make a drama we may want to perform in a Sunday feast program or whatever, what I have encouraged devotees to do is to have minor characters speak with each other in such a way that they may bring in some additional, points which are appropriate, and in that way, you kind of it's a kind of safe position. I think you can make it so that you can't be accused of taking too many liberties.
Yes, that's true. I think we had a podcast discussion on this, on using our imagination Krishna service, and you had mentioned this point.
Yeah.
So yes, Maharaj. So we could, in one sense, if you are going to talk about rasa, there is no way really emotion and imagination can be separated entirely, because ultimately emotion is meant to trigger the imagination, not in the sense of imagining up things, like imaginary things, but using our imagination to visualize the visualize realities. So yes, Maharaj. So, thank you, Maharaj. Should I try to summarize?
Please.
I don't know how. We did a lot of discussion today. So we started today with a brief overview of pertinent prayers. The first prayer of the Dashavatara Stotra, where very, very graphically and vividly, Ram distributes Ravan's 10 heads as offerings to the 10 directions. So we could consider it as poetic, or we could consider it as having happened in some other kalpa. And then we discussed the Bhagavatam verse, which is offering almost summarizing the prayer, summarizing the pastime, and then offering a prayer. And may this Lord protect us. So we discussed some aspects of that prayer also. And then we discussed 11th canto, the Tektva Sudhistaja, verse and how it refers to Ram. And you discussed from the Laghu Bhagavatamrita, the commentary of Rupa Goswami, from about that also. So then we came to how is Ram an ideal person? That was the theme, and there 2-3 things was the mood of sacrifice and service, which you mentioned, and then you do this very elaborated the parallel between say Ram sending Sita away and Dashrath sending Ram away, and then we talked about the ethical, some of the questions raised with respect to ethics, with respect to Wali's story, and you mentioned how Wali is actually convinced at the end, and so that aspect of Govindaraj saying that this is so Ram acted in such a way that Wali wouldn't surrender, so that the story would go on. That's quite a beautiful reading of it, and then you also mentioned about how the Ramayana has influenced so many countries and cultures where they have had different variants of the Ram Leela being depicted. And then, of course, before that, you mentioned about how Ramayana, it is an experience. It is a living experience. And they discussed about this, how we can keep hearing Ramayana and it's Ram Leela and it's still relishable. And this Western scholar who went to Varanasi and went to the banks of Ganga and actually saw it. So everybody knows the story, but still they relish it because they are participating and experiencing it. And then
and it's being reenacted.
Reenacted. It's being reenacted.
The sense is that it's real. It's happening again. The Leela is happening again.
Yes, I remembered one point which I forgot to mention there, that I also read one author's article, I don't know whether it's the same one. He said how if some character is playing as Ram, then they treat that person actually like Ram. They'll do the puja of that person, and if he might be the son of a father, but the father for that day will bow down to the son, treating him like Ram. So in that sense, it's actually a reenactment itself. And then I discussed toward the end about we're talking about the various retellings of the Ramayana and how far are the boundaries porous. So one theme I mentioned is about the harmonization like a musical orchestra, and then you said that we can't really ban things. We discussed about that many Ramayana translations and the deconstruction that happened because of that. And the solution to that is not banning the book or condemning the author, but it is actually getting the traditional perspective presented in the academia, and that can be done if we have more educational forums where that facility is available. That's not available, unfortunately, much in India, but the Bhaktivedanta Research Center is one thing that is coming up. That has already started off. And then for the living tradition right now, the boundaries patrolling would be by the gurus and sadhus. And so there is a Laukik Praman also, which is used, say, for example, when we hear Krishna Leela. And so there are two different things. One is considering the pastimes which are not given in scripture and how to accept them or not. And the other is, even the pastimes that are given in scripture, how do we enter more into them? So for that, there is some amount of character development, which is authorized to some extent by Rupa Goswami Nada Chandrika. And you also mentioned the caution that could be taken is, for dramatic purposes, have minor characters who speak the relevant things without having to, so that we're not accused of taking too many liberties. And ultimately, imagination and emotion, they're naturally related. So we can't divorce the two. If rasa is to be experienced, imagination has to be stimulated. And that's why we can all immerse ourselves in Ram Leela. Any points I left out or anything you want to add, Maharaj?
Maybe just one small point to add, which has kind of fascinated me since I read it some years back, that I think it was the 10th century aesthetician, Anandavardhana, who who said that the dominant rasa of the Ramayana is karuna. It's karuna rasa. Karuna is a sense, it's a sense of compassion, but it's also a sense of of pathos. In a sense, the Ramayana, within, let's say this, the Valmiki Ramayana, he's speaking about the Valmiki Ramayana, which is considered the original, because Valmiki is the Adi Kavi, so this is poetry. So poetry has to express rasa. And the dominant rasa, he said, is karuna. And if you look at it from that perspective, it's very interesting to see how the whole story of the Ramayana is actually deeply moving because of the feelings of separation, Ram from Sita especially. So there's the hero, there's the Vira Rasa, of course. Rama is, killing Ravana and so on. But to identify Karuna as the dominant rasa, I think is very fascinating, and also inviting for us to understand the Valmiki Ramayana is deeply nourishing to our bhakti. In other words, we don't have to think, oh, I'm a Krishna Bhakta. I don't have anything to do with Rama. He's all about dharma and rules and regulations. That's not for me. No, it's deeply about bhakti, and on the level also of viraha, but it's the particular flavor is karuna.
Beautiful. Viraha. So earlier you mentioned also about abhava. That is also a praman, the absence of. So
yeah.
So this is beautiful. I had heard about karuna, but I didn't know it was Anandavardhan who had said that. So then it gels very nicely with the viraha bhava. So how are karuna and viraha, are they synonymous, or karuna is more like in English we would call it pathos, and separation is one way of feeling pathos?
I'm not an expert in these things.
Okay.
So I don't want to speculate. But I would understand karuna in relation to pathos. Whether they are, coextensive meaning may not be appropriate.
Okay.
But with karuna, of course, I think there's something additional, which is the sense of compassion.
Okay. So who is feeling compassion for whom?
Well, you can say Ram is having compassion on all of us. He's showing compassion to everyone in the story in one way or another. He's showing compassion to Ravana by killing him,
Okay. That's true. I think yes, Maharaj. That's beautiful. Thank you, Maharaj, for adding that. And thank you very much for your association. This is very wide-ranging discussion on the Ram Leela.
So who comes next in our series?
Our Aradhya Deva, Krishna.
Oh, Krishna is counted. Okay. There's different lists of 10 avatars. So
we want to go to Balram then? Of course. We can do, or who do you prefer?
Or Balaram and Krishna. I don't know. Or we do 11.
Okay. Yeah, I think Balram and Krishna is a good idea, because if you have to speak about Balram, we really can't speak much without speaking about Krishna.
Exactly.
And Krishna would become like too big in one sense to cover in one session also. So you can focus on Balram and their relationship with Krishna.
Exactly. That sounds good.
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay.
I look forward to your association next month, Maharaj. Thank you very much. Humble
Thank
way.
you.
Hare Krishna.
Gaur Premanande Hari
Hari
Bol.
Hari.
Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Thank you.